Welcome to English for Engineers. I'm your host, Olivia Augustin. Join me on my podcast as I dig deep into all things technical English, business English, and international business communication to bring you a lifetime of knowledge in a digestible format. Hello friends, fellow engineers and the occasional word nerds who are listening in. Today's podcast is all about engineering culture. And yes, that's slightly different to regular cultural differences. But first I want to introduce you to my guest today. We're old school mates. We graduated in 1999 in Austria from what I'd loosely translate as a tech college. And I want to introduce him in a very Austrian way, with all the pomp and circumstances that are only familiar to natives of this cute little banana republic of ours. Let me welcome Diplom-Ingenieur Dr. der Technik, Christian Urich. Hey Christian, so good to have you here.
Hey.
Hey. So we just recently reconnected after more than 20 years, and we both have the very same recollection of the subpar English lessons at Austrian schools. But that makes for another podcast episode, I guess. So why did I invite him today? Several reasons. Number one, he's cool. Number two, he lives and works in Melbourne, Australia. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more of his accent. He taught at the Monash University in Melbourne. And he's no stranger to rapidly changing work environments, because there's a whole world outside of Central Europe that is handling projects in different ways than you might be used to. So engineering culture varies around the world. But I hand it over to you, Christian. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. Yeah, thanks for having me on today. So as you said, we met, and I guess we spent together almost 5 years.
5 years in the same room.
5 years, yeah. In the same room. And I can't remember. I don't think it was always easy, because it was not that many girls. I think it was mostly boys in the class, as I remember it.
I think we me and Elizabeth, if I remember correctly, two of us, yeah.
So,
and a lot of big brothers.
Boys. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but all good. And I think as we had our first chat, it was kind of remembering our English classes, as you were saying. And I have this vivid memory of, because I was never great in English. And then basically always between a fail and a pass, and I had this exam at the end. I remember I had to promise the English teacher that I never speak English in my life again.
Oh, she will turn in her grave.
Yeah.
Or be very proud. Or be very proud of you, I guess.
So it was basically, the message was, never tell anyone in the world that I taught you English, and you never speak English again, then I'll let you pass.
Okay, so we won't name her now.
No, I won't name her. No. Yeah, basically from there, so it was this small Alpine town. And then straight from there, I went to university. So I did what now would be a master's degree in civil engineering. So I did a combined degree between structural and computational engineering. And then during that time, I was also working in a small consulting firm doing a lot of structural engineering. And I guess I really liked it at the start. I can remember the first 3 or 4 years. It was just amazing. You basically just go from designing the structure for this small single family house, and then you go to apartment buildings, then you go to smaller bridges, larger bridges, and so on. But then after a while, it was more like, I can't imagine myself doing that for the next 35 years. So it's kind of when I was just thinking about, this is going to be my career. And then I had a good mate of mine. He was doing this quite interesting project at the University of Innsbruck, where I was doing a PhD. And then just asked him, do you have something? Is there some work coming up? And he was saying, we're always looking for people that can use a computer. And this is how I ended up in that research group, having no idea. This was also not in structural engineering. That was more towards environmental engineering.
Okay. What was the research about?
The research in the end ended up being I think it's easiest explained as playing SimCity for engineers. So it's quite out there. It's quite abstract. So what we were looking into is creating cities in a computer environment, including infrastructure, and then really testing how we can build resilient, sustainable infrastructure into the future, considering urban development and climate change. So it's quite an interesting, quite abstract project in itself. So it's a lot of math, a lot of modeling. But I ended up joining that group. By that time, before I joined, I didn't know that it's actually a really great group with a huge international network as well. So it's kind of really well regarded. And through that network, I was also working as part of a European project. And this is where I met our colleagues here at Monash University in Australia. So it's a bit of an odd combination, but Melbourne came into this European project as an international case study. So because there's lots going on here in terms of water management and how things could be done differently. And then
thinking of the recent floodings, that might be a really good idea.
Yeah. If you work in water, Australia is a very good place. You move from droughts to flooding, nothing in between. So it's I can remember when I first time traveled to Melbourne, it was on the news because they were still going through the millennium drought, basically running out of water in Melbourne. And you had all this advertising for rainwater harvesting tanks, so to install them to save water
on your roof or in a garden. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm living in the Netherlands now, so no stranger to floodings as well.
Yeah.
Enough water here. Yeah. So how did you finally end up in Australia?
Yeah, and basically through that project, I got to know the university there, the key players as well, and the professor there. And then she invited me to join her research team. So they won a very large research grant, basically, which is across Australia, looking into defining what they call water-sensitive cities are. These are different terms that are used around the world for the same concept. So it's all about nature, sustainability, greening cities again, bringing that back. She wanted to work with me, so she brought me into her research team. And then I did that for a couple of years. And then there was an opening coming up at Monash University. So basically, and then I started there as a lecturer for a few years.
What did you teach?
I taught, out of all things, groundwater, which is not in my core area. But since I had that background in computational engineering, so I did a lot of those numerical models and things like that. So I taught groundwater modeling in particular and did that for undergrad classes as well as at a master's level. And then continued my research in that area as well.
That sounds super interesting. Yeah. So many questions just popping up in my head now, but I have jotted down another one I wanted to ask you. Gosh. So
and then
we were talking. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, go on.
And then basically from here, so this was then during I was saying if you're thinking of doing an academic career, it's a great pathway. It's very competitive, but one of the challenges I had with it is I love teaching, I love doing research. Don't like it. I like doing it at the same time. So it is basically you're torn in many directions. It's quite intense. In particular, during the COVID phase, it was really challenging. Because then a lot of basically whole universities, everything shifted online. You still meant to have your research going on and so on. Mm-hmm. And also by that time, I was thinking more looking towards something more impactful in terms of my work. So I wanted to basically go back out, doing some consulting projects, having some real world impact. And that's why I joined then quite a boutique environmental engineering consulting firm. So
during the pandemics, things changed for you as well.
Yeah, things changed a lot.
Interesting. So Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Let me just go back in time a little bit. When we were talking last week, catching up after those almost 25 years, one of the first topics we touched was how different engineering in Austria or Germany is compared to the rest of the world. And you nailed the phrase, you said numbers versus text.
Yeah.
And you shared an experience from when you worked in Austria as a structural engineer, and you said you had meter-long sheets of paper, handwritten, almost handwritten calculations, and how that differs to document-based engineering. Can you elaborate that a bit? Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, so this is and look, I worked mainly in Austria in structural engineering, so that's what I can comment on. But also basically also throughout universities, I guess it's a similar story. So you start your work with a cover sheet, and then I remember we did quite highly specialized structural designs for large skiing arenas and things like that. And it was basically the second page was immediately going into handwritten analysis. So it's kind of, you really start with numbers. Basically, you have the table of content, and then numbers. And I can remember we started at some point measuring it's not just how many folders you have filled. It was basically just how many meters of wall of structural designs you have basically done. And I can remember it's just this enormous project. I think we ended up with 3 or 4 meters just handwritten structural designs there. But as I said, this is basically just let the numbers and the drawings speak for themselves. So that's basically it.
Oh yeah, that could be a catchphrase of Austrian engineering: "Let the drawings speak."
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
But I think what is interesting there, because it's the expectation of an Austrian engineering and engineering design firm. This is how you do work. Because I can remember also when we had work coming in, and also then basically just having a look or certifying what other people did in terms of their structural designs. And it was literally the same. It started with the cover page and then straight went into numbers. And you were so used to the structure, you knew what to look for. So it's kind of that you could navigate that space. And was great.
Yeah, I even remember vaguely one of our professors telling us that we don't need to be good communicators necessarily, that we don't need to be able to write in a certain way, that we don't have to be able to write persuasive, or that we don't have to be able to express ourselves, because we get a secretary later for that kind of stuff, which is a weird thing to say now. And we always should trust the drawings and the numbers. And so how changed that? Because I know when we moved to the Netherlands, from Austria to the Netherlands, I've never worked as an engineer in the Netherlands, I have to say, but my husband does. And so I know from him how he had to change from everything based on numbers and drawings to a document-based engineering. So what's your experience with that? What did you have to learn? How did you have to change your perception of documents?
Yeah, it is so and this is now might depend on the field as well. So I've moved then into environmental engineering. It is also particularly but it's the same in research as well. It's always, you need to address the so what question. So what is the actual number telling you? What should I do with that? And it comes from a little bit of a background that you are the expert. You have engaged with the material the longest. You have been working on a particular project for months. But it's kind of you're so in the depth there. You really need to be able to bring that together and then communicate to someone what are the high level insight. What does it mean? How can I use that to make decisions? And I can tell you, they want to see they read the executive summary on top, which is something that I've never heard before in Austria. It is basically just it's a one-page summary, and it doesn't matter how long that report is. It's a one-page summary in front, and then basically this is what most people are gonna read, and this needs to have the key outputs there. And this is then this is what gets used then. And if you want to know the details, you go into the reports. This is where you can get the nuance. But usually the first page is what is the most important message, and you need to pull that out of your numbers. You need to be able to translate that. What does it mean? What should I do with that? How do I go forward with it?
And I think you have to be quite convincing.
Yeah.
In one, and if you want to summarize everything in one page. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to build it's building a narrative. So I hear the word a lot. It's a narrative, and you need to think about, and these are things that I never came across in the German environment, Austrian environment as well. It's about, you need to think about the target audience. So who is going to read your report? Whom are you writing that for? Who is the end user of that? This is then also depending on, this is then how you pull the information out present it back, and then really build the narrative, the story around that. What have you found, and what are you meant to do with that?
That's one question that will come from my clients now, I guess, from my engineers I'm working with in Germany and Netherlands. Do you have to dumb it down, your summary?
I wouldn't call it dumb it down. It really depends on whom you're addressing with that. Because in the end and this now depends on really, so we write, for example, we work a lot with governments as well, so local and state government, and then your work might influence policy. So that goes then into a briefing for a minister, for example, what they should do with that work. And there needs to be something, they're not a subject matter expert, but it needs to be a digestible message what to do with it. So it's kind of
digestible. That's a good word.
Yeah, and it's not a dumbing down, but in the end, it's kind of the you need to bring it to you need to translate it so your target audience can use it. So.
Yeah, you have to translate all those numbers into phrases and words your client can use to further communicate their project, I guess.
Because for them, a number is in the end, it's kind of, I don't know what to do with that. So they're sitting in front of, it's kind of, what are you telling me? What should I do? So this is what it comes down to. And then it's basically helping them.
How did you go from, as you said earlier, you were not good at English at school. And how did you go from being that Austrian guy to, how did you become a convincing writer?
I wouldn't say I'm a convincing writer myself yet. What it comes down to is following the structure that people give you. I think this is one of the things that I learned, or that was taught very early on. And this is when it comes to writing academic publications, if you write your research papers, but also if you write your industry reports and so on, you follow a recipe. So those documents have a structure. You're not writing a novel. It's the
Sorry, I'm laughing because we did not talk about that earlier. But what you don't know that one of the things that I almost preach is follow the structure, and you're not trying to win a Nobel Prize, Nobel Prize of Literature. You're not writing poetry. Just follow the recipe, follow the structure. That's one of my students hear from me all the time. So that's funny that you're saying that.
And when I've taught undergrad students, and we were working with groups of 400 students, had to review hundreds of students' reports. And it's basically the most important thing is they need to follow the structure. If you splatter information across your 400-page document, I don't know where to find it. I don't know what to look for. It is
frustrating.
It's frustrating. It's confusing. It doesn't help. What you want is kind of, you have this now really depends on so how we write reports. You start with the introduction. There needs to be what's your aims, what have you done there, how have you achieved the objectives, then you describe the methods that you have done, then your results, and then conclusions and insight, and then at the front you write an executive summary. And all those things need to follow the structure. And this is how you start. And if you look, there are people that can write brilliantly. They can deviate from that completely fine.
Because you just enjoy their reading.
Yeah, you just enjoy their reading.
Yeah, their writing.
They present it in that way and just flows, and it works really well. If you are not a confident writer, really stick to those, and then you find it much easier. And then it becomes basically, it's just that people are saying it's a recipe in the end that you follow. It's kind of it's like in a cookbook as well. And you might have seen those on the internet where they now start always with the massive backstory about whatever, how that comes. Nobody cares.
Everybody knows. Everyone knows to scroll down. Yeah.
What do you scroll to? Recipes. I want to see the ingredient list, and then I want to see the methods, and that's it. And that's it. And that's also the same in an engineering report. This is what you want to see, and you know what to look for.
That cooking analogy wouldn't work with me because I open the book and then I just look at the picture and I do whatever I want with the recipe. Yeah. So for me you would have to explain it like a mathematic formula that I have to follow. Yeah. Interesting. So that was the difference between let's call it numbers based and document based engineering, or traditional Austrian engineering, document based engineering. But regarding engineering culture, management style, are there differences in how the teams work together? What would you say?
This is relatively, I probably can more comment on large and small organizations. I guess this is what more my experience was there. I worked in a very small engineering firm in Austria, so this similar to, it's kind of 3 or 4 people. This is very agile. You specialize in an area and then go for the jobs. One very fascinating area I always find in Europe is that each country has a little bit of a niche of what they're doing extremely well. So in this, it's kind of this is then. I remember for whatever reason we were working together with a steel manufacturer, and we're just doing these massive international projects all across Europe and I think Russia as well. But it's just steel design. And this is really doing fantastic projects there, although we were only a 4-people company. This is that. What I've noticed more in Australia or in the English-speaking world, it's pretty dominated by very, very large engineering firms. So it's kind of, we're talking about companies that have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people. But they also operate then mostly in English-speaking countries as well. It's kind of that the world is a bit divided. So you have the European side of things that works on their areas, particularly I think it might have changed now with the current situation, but lots of projects in Eastern Europe, Russia, going into that world. I think Middle East as well, whereas here I think lots of more projects Southeast Asia as well. So this is some of the work that we did as well. So yeah, but dominated by these very large firms. Yeah.
So coming back to that project management style, something that I mentioned with I always call them my engineers because I'm never sure if I should call them students or clients. I think both terms are weird. So my engineers that I'm working with, they have hardly ever heard of Scrum or Agile, which is a tool to manage projects. Interestingly enough, it is used in the Netherlands. I mean, it comes from the IT world, but it is used for big infrastructural projects in the Netherlands as well. How's that in Australia? Because my Dutch engineers, they almost all know what Scrum and Agile is. As soon as I'm talking to Austrians and Germans, they're like, never heard. What does the word even mean?
That wouldn't work. No, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
An Austrian civil engineer using that. Look, we come across it. I think it's not mainstream yet. I think look, it depends on the area. It is we find it if you do product development. So this is when we also started to use it. If we build, let's say, software tools or decision support systems for clients, this is when we would start to move into that area of Scrum. So it's kind of when we are also starting to use it for larger projects as well. Put it that way. So it's coming in. It's particularly when we use it when the client is unsure what the outcome of their project should be. So put it that
classic.
Way.
Then it's good.
Then it's really useful. So we usually then start to have multiple stages in a project, multiple exit points, and between that we use those Scrum and Agile techniques
to navigate,
work
path
with the client, what to do, develop a minimal viable product, start to iterate on that, and through that actually develop some where the client can see, all right, this is actually what I'm after. So this is in
those
that
shorter sprints really help the client to decide what he wants or what they want.
So that works well in those environments but then there are other projects where it's kind of where there's a really clear outcome. So it's kind of let's say, look, we want to have a demand analysis. We want to understand how households use water and how that changes on the climate change. That is a really clear question that wouldn't necessarily use those.
No, true.
Those methods. So it's really depending on the task, larger projects where the outcome is a bit uncertain. This is where we move into those areas. Also, when it's more research driven. So, we have, for example, a project now where we're looking into developing artificial intelligence to irrigate a very large park in Sydney. So it's kind of where we're working on that. Lots of stakeholders involved, lots of clients, bringing it all together. So this is where we're basically working through those. So we're using agile development for that. Whereas I said, then for other projects, we would do that.
Okay.
Very traditional approach.
Yeah. Interesting. You just said, you just mentioned climate change, and that brought another thought into my. I thought of something else. Let's put it that way. The last 2 years, the pandemic. How has that changed your work? How you do your work? How you work together in teams? Did you change your work at all, or just what has changed in the last 2 years?
What has changed? We're not traveling for a meeting anymore everywhere. I think that was one of and this is, but I'm not sure if it's particularly Australian, but we had a culture where, look, going on a plane here is like taking a bus. So it's kind of, you had a meeting up in Sydney or in Brisbane. Deal. No, meeting up in Sydney and Brisbane, you fly up for the day. It's a 2-hour client meeting. You fly up and you fly back the same day. And I think that is, in terms of, when we think about the whole context, climate change and all that, it's probably something you shouldn't have done in the first place. But it was so, you're so easy. Used to that culture. You want to meet clients in person. You want to talk to that was so that was just the expectations to do it that way. Nowadays, this is just done over Zoom, basically. Although, can't really tell yet because we're still not really through the pandemic, if it's bouncing back.
You had pretty harsh lockdowns as well.
Yeah, Melbourne was, I think,
longer
one of the
and stricter.
Longest, yeah. So we're still just starting to go back to work, but that has definitely changed. What has changed as well is the expectations to be at work. So it is, I guess this is the story a bit everywhere, where we started to realize we can work in teams from home efficiently, and actually works quite well. That to say, we're just navigating those challenges, particularly with graduates that just have left university and started our team. How are we going to integrate them into the broader consulting environment,
and do that online,
which doesn't really work. So there's still an expectations of coming into the office and so on to build that culture. So this is something, I guess, which we're still working through.
Do you think that, especially in research, that personal contact is necessary to make progress, to bounce ideas?
Yeah, I think it is I think for people to work closely together, there is something about the sitting in an office, being able to bounce ideas, working on that. What I find more the challenge is, I think if you're actually working on a project together, that works quite well, that you can just work that through. What I find more challenging is you start to develop silos quite easily because you always work in the same team. You actually don't know what the other teams are doing. And I think that visibility is, particularly when you're young, can be quite a challenge because it's just, you don't have any insight what other parts of the company are doing, but you might actually be interested in some work, might want to join their teams, want to explore something there, but you just don't have any visibility on that.
It's a kind of a professional isolation.
Yeah, and I can see that. Yeah, you basically, because you have your hierarchies, you have your team structures, you work within those teams. You don't have the coffee break where you just hang out, have a random chat. Oh, just working on that issue.
I see. If you could give other engineers, students, my clients who suddenly find themselves in an English-speaking environment or project, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would that be?
Don't worry about how good or bad your English is. It is.
Oh, that's excellent.
It is, in the end, if you just sit there, don't say anything, I think this is probably the worst that you can do. just because you're shy and you don't want to talk. It is, people can usually puzzle together what do you mean, and they're gonna ask you if they don't understand it. So it is completely fine if your English is broken, as long as you can communicate your ideas and what you're after, and there can be in broken English. That's completely fine. Yeah, don't be shy, and also don't apologize for your English. You don't need to do that either. It is just what it is, and just and look, I've gone through that path. My English wasn't the greatest either. People are very forgiving. People are usually just completely fine, and then you work through that. And this is because it's in the end, it's more about working on a project together and achieving those outcomes. So it is your ideas matter more than how good or bad your English is in the end.
Oh, that is excellent advice. Could have come from me. No, sorry, my weird kind of humor. No, really, really excellent advice. Thank you so much. We're talking already for half an hour.
All right.
I think time flies when you're having fun. Thank you so much, Christian, for your time and for your input. That was great, and I already have tons of other ideas where I definitely want to invite you back. Thank you so much. I think the one thing we've learned, just do it, just talk, don't be shy, open your mouth, don't apologize. People will work it out. And don't forget that even if you're an engineer, even if you're a numbers, I don't want to say guy, if you're a numbers person, you might want to need documents somewhere in your life. So don't throw out your course books. You might want to need it, or you just come to me and take a lesson. That's always a good idea. Okay, Christian, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks
that was it for today. Oh, it was great. It was really great. I could go on. Okay, that was it for today, my friends. This was English for Engineers. I'm your host, Olivia Augustin. Talk to you soon.